Hi, everyone. I believe I'm live. Thank you very much for joining me for this talk on the new journey that we are embarking after the Huawei and Google divorce. Let me first tell you a bit about myself. So, my name is Thean Hoogenboezem. I'm from South Africa, and I work for a company called DVT, and I'm currently consulting with the Mauritian Commercial Bank. And over the last 7 years of my journey in Android development, I've done a bit of iOS development, a bit of Angular development, and most recently I've been integrating the Backbase platform into an application. But let's jump into the actual part of this talk. So to get us to this point, let's revise a bit about like Android's beginning. So Android had humble beginnings. It was announced in November 2007, over 10 years ago. And then the first commercial device was shipped in September 2008, being the HTC Dream, or known also as the T-Mobile G1. It's quite interesting if we look at statistics about that time. Like there was a little bit of Linux on the worldwide smartphone operating system market share, but in 2 years' time or a year after Android actually went live, it already took a 17% chunk of that, and Symbian started to fade. And 10 years later, the market share looked very different, and Android has dominated the mobile operating market share over the last decade. So, what was the original Android operating system dream? It was to have a worldwide standardized experience. We wanted it to run on multiple devices from multiple device manufacturers using GMS or Google Mobile Service capabilities, and all applications to be centralized and distributed by the Google Play Store. Vendors had a bit of a different dream about this. They saw the Android open source platform as a foundation for them to build their custom experiences on top of, and to add value added services and to utilize the GMS ecosystem to drive their needs. So that has happened in the last decade. Most Android smartphones have shipped with pre-installed proprietary software. 70% of them have been using GMS, and vendors have had custom experiences and value-added services in there. What this meant is that we had a common problem that I think we all as Android developers in the community is very familiar with: fragmentation. Having all of these different vendors, multiple device screen sizes, hardware specifications, different versions of Android. We've all had a bit of an interesting story. I'm sure everyone here can tell an interesting story of trying to solve a problem based on one specific permutation or piece of fragmentation. There were some answers to fragmentation that started in the last few years. And I mean, Kotlin was not specifically there to answer fragmentation, but by standardizing and solving some of the development problems, it actually assisted in creating a more standardized development approach. Material design gave us standardized designs across different devices, and also drove vendors' approach to actually standardize their UIs. Android Jetpack came along and took all of the different support libraries and all the different parts of Android and combined it into architectural UI, behavioral foundational concepts. And also Google went a step further and they introduced the stable APIs for the Android kernel so that vendors would no longer touch the kernel of Android, and it allowed for easier updating. And Google went a step further where they proposed faster deprecation of all the APIs. And all of these things helped to simplify this process. But during this process, around 2018, the divorce between Google and Huawei started, where in actual fact, I think it looks more something like this, because you have two companies that worked very well together, but were now basically forced no longer to work together, not by choice. And basically there was some impact from this. So what is HMS and how does it fit in? Well, HMS is the Huawei Mobile Services ecosystem. It allows distribution, it has cloud storage and cloud-based capabilities, and the idea is that it should replace the Google Mobile Service packages on Huawei devices. It is Huawei's roadmap to be independent since they no longer can rely on GMS, and I believe it's the intrinsic puzzle piece to the future of this landscape. And HMS includes some core components to match those offered by GMS. There's the app services, media capabilities, graphics, smart device capabilities. There's security options that's available. They have their own full suite of ML packages, and there's many more applications, but these are just a few that I wanted to mention just to quickly cover what the HMS core is about. And then let's talk about the implications this has on the different stakeholders. For Huawei themselves, HMS now means they have their own cloud service ecosystem. They have improved value-added services in their ecosystem. They can scale development or developer community, and the usage of App Gallery now increasing gives them full leverage of using their own distribution ecosystem. The cons might be that a lot of customers might be reluctant to leave the GMS ecosystem, and a lot of customers who might have been using Huawei devices who are tied into the GMS ecosystem might choose not to go with Huawei's future view or roadmap. For device users of Huawei devices, it means that they have better value-added services, better customized experiences. They benefit from innovation that is driven by the re-implementation of existing capabilities, but they are potentially losing out on cloud history and data from GMS, and also maybe losing out on some access to really awesome Google services. One notable aspect, Google Satellite is not available in the HMS package at this point. There's no equivalent yet. In terms of companies, they have potential access to new customers and to new innovative capabilities provided by HMS and the Huawei ecosystem, but they will lose out on that market share if they do not support it. There's a development investment required with that and additional store listings. Also, in terms of matching user experience on Huawei devices that have GMS capabilities, they need to now port those implementations to support. They might not work better or the same in the HMS ecosystem, and there might be data loss on features linked to GMS capabilities. In terms of us, the devs and the teams building these applications, the pros relate to us being able to learn new skills, to have a new reinvented innovation partner, new career paths, and access to another dev community. And there's now opportunities to innovate solutions that fit both ecosystems that might be non-GMS, non-HMS, or a supporting model of both. The cons for us, of course, we have additional support requirements. We need to develop in different ways to support this. We need to restructure our DevOps pipelines. We need to manage store listings differently. We need to do additional testing to make sure that the HMS equivalents are working. And HMS services might not offer the same capabilities as GMS. So losing out on some great services offered by Google in terms of GMS and Firebase is a potential con, and this creates more fragmentation in supporting multiple cloud and value-adding ecosystems. For third-party libraries and products, the pros are that those that have offered non-GMS service offerings will potentially gain popularity since they are supported by both, and there's new possibilities on how to build capabilities or services supporting either both HMS and GMS or not tied to either. Of course, the con that if you have an existing third-party library or product that is heavily embedded with GMS, it might be troublesome to support equivalent capabilities of HMS. And there's now a pressure to support HMS equivalent capabilities. For Google, there's also implications. The pros might be that brand loyalists of the GMS ecosystem will stick with GMS supporting devices, but the cons are there's more fragmentation challenges in the dev community, losing developer advocates to Huawei, and if we talk about losing cloud service customers to HMS, existing or new, there's the market share that Google has in cloud-based services is being challenged by this divergence. In our mobile dev landscape, HMS brings broadening landscape, and it broadens the landscape, and this creates new opportunities for all of us, but we have more divergence, fragmentation, and more things to consider and to understand. So what is this next chapter? What is the operating system of the future where this all leads from. So based on our growing market requirements and expectations, the battle is on for the next generation operating system. This is not an easy task, yet an important milestone. So let's talk a little bit about who the contenders are. So like HMS is now setting a new trend. Despite the Android open source project being open source, HMS support is setting a foundation to get users into the Harmony operating system ecosystem. And the growing Huawei device user base without GMS will pave the way to this. There might even be options to migrate to Harmony OS as soon as later this year, and this diverges further from the Android and Android dev community. But about Harmony OS, how Huawei sees it, they see it as a future-proof distributed operating system, an all-scenario experience. The development language that they cover relates to Java, XML, and Harmony markup language. And apps that live in this ecosystem will be able to run on multiple devices from a specific user. So devices will share apps, data, and capabilities, and this breaches into IoT. There is one limitation, although, that I've already identified that might touch the development community. There's a requirement for Harmony OS Development's IDE, Dev Echo Studio, to run only on Windows-based machines. This might get by, but a lot of the community today in the Android space and a lot of us mobile development spaces pretty much work on MacBooks or Linux-based machines. Windows is there, but it will create a bit of a limitation on who will develop for this operating system and ecosystem. And of course, we all know Google Fuchsia has been around for a while, designed for security and privacy, designed to be updatable, designed for performance, and there's a lot of parts to this. In terms of design to be updatable, Fuchsia will run across multiple devices. This work almost like web packages work today within a browser, but in an operating system. So software is always up to date. The core of Fuchsia won't have garbage collection or those parts. So it's designed to have performant parts in that side. It's designed to be language and runtime agnostic, and it's also open source. This makes it market accessible to a lot of different people. So there's a lot of different benefits to this new operating system. What it's not, Google are very explicit about this. It's not based on Linux. It has its own kernel, Zircon, and it's not a microkernel. So it doesn't strive for minimality. It focuses on security, privacy, and performance. So it's not a user experience. It allows users to tie into the parts that they need and want. And it's also, they very explicitly say it's not a science experiment. It's the goal to power production devices and products used by business and critical applications. I needed to quickly talk about Tizen because Tizen's been on this market for a while, and they've got some shares in smart devices, so as watches, and also driving TV platforms, but they have not really taken a share in the mobile operating system side of things. So, in my view, the ideal future operating system needs to be distributed, language and runtime agnostic, needs to be performant, it needs to have security for its users and keep their data and everything private. It needs to be updatable, development and developer friendly, and it needs to be market accessible to the state that Android has been market accessible, and it has to be compatible with the existing Android open source project or Android ecosystem, because it's such a big market share that comes from that. So just one other note before I round off. Another interesting divergence in this space is Paytm, the Paytm mini app store that launched this week to challenge Google's billing policy. Paytm is already a SDK included in many apps to perform payments and offers a lot of capabilities. What will the future path of this store be? Will there be additional services that will be offered with it? And will this create additional fragmentation to consider when building applications? So in conclusions, HMS and beyond, Huawei's HMS is rolling out to a lot of organizations and updating and deploying apps to App Gallery. The Harmony operating system might be potentially coming later this year, and I would expect that Google's Fuchsia operating system will not wait long after. So diverging app stores and additional fragmentation will shape this market further. So who knows what the next big operating system will be. Android's not going anywhere, but any compatibility with it might pave some path to the future of operating systems. Questions? Okay, so can you somehow compare the situation with Huawei and its HMS versus Amazon Fire devices? So this is an important use case to look at because it might be important to note that Amazon Fire has been around for a while. So there might be some comparisons or risks or similarities between two, but I think Huawei's existing presence in the market as a device manufacturer with their own experiences might give them a little bit more leverage on the mobile side, although Amazon has a much bigger cloud presence already. So that's another contender. I don't have the answer to that, but it's an important question. Is there a way to get Firebase running without GMS? So basically, one part that I know is that you can use some of the capabilities of Firebase on an HMS-only environment, but I don't think that's the future plan. Does the combination of HMS. Can Flutter applications run on Harmony OS? Not that I know of yet. I know that Flutter development is one of the core parts of Fuchsia. So that's an interesting part for that question, but I don't know about the compatibility into Harmony OS. I would imagine that the Android part, if there is a port for that to Harmony OS, will allow it. You think there will be a chance to see GS integrated again to Huawei devices in the next 4 years? Not sure about that one. Okay, I think I've addressed all of these questions. All right. Unless there's any other questions, I thank you all for attending my talk and looking forward to engaging with you further in the conference. Enjoy the rest of the conference.